Welcome everyone to this Learnit virtual event. My name is Lori Forcier and I'm Learnit's Chief Global Content Officer. Our mission at Learnit is simple: to support the meaningful conversations that education leaders want and need to have change happen. We do this through our in-person event, which will be held in January in London, and we do it through our virtual events like this one. Today's session is re-engineering global higher education following COVID-19. And we have an excellent panel of higher education leaders joining us today. We have the presidents of Paul Quinn College in Texas and London King's College, Michael Sorrell and Ed Byrne. King's College London, pardon me, I'm so sorry. The Director of Innovation from Tec de Monterrey in Mexico, Pepe Escamilla, and an expert on faculty culture, specifically faculty adoption of EdTech from the Human Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon, Lauren Herckis. A quick note on format: we'll have 45 minutes of moderated discussion focused on the decisions that these leaders are making for their campuses and their communities for the summer term, the autumn term, and beyond. And then we'll open up the floor to some questions from our audience. And now I'll turn it over to our fantastic moderator, senior reporter from Quartz, Jenny Anderson.
Thank you so much, Lori, and I hope there are no problems with my audio. We were having some. If we do, Lori will pick up for me. So I want to dig right in. Universities around the world are trying to make very difficult decisions right now in the face of tremendous uncertainty about the virus, about the rules the governments will be setting, and clearly around the risks to students, to faculty, and to the communities that everybody lives in. So I want to start with Michael, if I could, picking on you first. You are leaning toward taking the decision to not open this fall. I don't think you've made a decision yet. I want to give you a tiny bit of background on Michael. He is the head of Paul Quinn College and has been for 12 years. And if you watch his South by Southwest talk,
I have earned that extra year. So it's 13.
13, I'm sorry. 13 years. You've got to watch his South by Southwest talk, because he will be the first to say they did not hire him because of his turnaround prowess in higher education. He didn't have any experience. He took the job because no one wanted it. It has been a remarkable turnaround story. He's created a new business model, which we're going to talk about today. He's turned his football field into a farm, and he's created a movement. I think he's going to talk about some of those things. But let's start, Michael, with where you are right now in your decision, and what are the questions you're asking yourself about the summer and about the fall?
Sure. So first of all, let me just say how honored I am to be here and have the opportunity to learn from my fellow panelists. I am a person that always looks for an opportunity to be inspired. And I think the work that my panelists are doing is incredibly inspiring. So it is a privilege to be here with you all this morning. We're going to open. Our issue is just delivering the content remotely. Right. So we think that, just the reality of it is we're not sure how any school can keep students safe and healthy without the presence of a vaccine and without, let me say this, in a traditional academic setting, right? Without a vaccine, without widespread testing, I just don't know how you could do that. I mean, there's this amazing study by Cornell that talks about schools, colleges, that environment. Students are 2 degrees of separation away from each other. And I think that's right. So if you can't guarantee the safety of your students and staff, then I think you have to look for different options. And to me, the best option is to teach them remotely. And then your challenge becomes, how do you deliver remote learning in a way that is engaging, that creates a sense of urgency for students to participate and engage. And our student population is a population that comes from Pell Grant communities, right? So 80 to 85% of our students annually are on Pell Grant. And that student population has no fondness for online learning. And there are lots of things that are the reason for that. I mean, some of it is, if you've lived your life feeling ignored, then if you're sitting online, it reinforces those notions, or it triggers those notions of being ignored. So we are partnering with an entity which, we haven't made public yet, so I can't do it here, but we're partnering with an entity to reimagine what online learning can look like for this demographic. But we have game plan scenarios for if the world returns to some semblance of normalcy in August, in January, and then in August of 2021. And if things aren't normal, we're going to reduce tuition and fees because it doesn't make sense to charge people the same price for a different experience. We are then going to use this entire year to reimagine the possibilities of our institution. We look at it as the gift of time, and we have no intention of wasting it. My answer was so scintillating that it blew out her connection. Or it was so terrible that she just gave up on us, right? Like one or the other.
No, I'm back.
Sorry about that.
I'm here.
Penny, are you with us? Okay.
I am. Thank you, Michael. I want to come back to that idea of the gift of time, and I want to talk a little bit more about that transition, but I'd love to go to Ed. Ed, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me all right?
I can. I'm sorry we can't see you, but thank you so much for joining us. Ed is the president and principal of King's College London, neurobiologist by training, and has just written a book with Charles Clark called The University Challenge, Changing Universities in a Changing World, which seems well-timed, as it turns out. You have taken the decision, I understand, to open this fall, open in person and open online. So students will have the option. For students who can't be there, they'll be online, and students who can might be able to or will be able to. I would love for you to talk us through how you came to that decision and what that has meant to get there. What do you all have to do to get to that position to open those doors?
Well, look, we're in a slightly different position maybe to some of the others on this call, although I don't know that because we're the largest medical research university in Europe in terms of the number of staff we employ. And we've got over 100 COVID research groups working currently in the university. So of my 10,000 staff, or our 10,000 staff, over 1,000 are still, in their labs working. We've also got our two major hospitals at the epicenter of the London outbreak, which after New York, unfortunately, looks as though it's going to be the most affected city on earth. So it just gives the whole place a different feel. We haven't stopped. With the teaching side, we have about 40,000 in-person students, half of whom are international, and we have about 5,000 online. And we've got a lot of online experience, which we've had for many years. So we moved all in-person students online over 2 weeks. Actually, we use Teams. Some seem to have used Zoom. We use Teams, and we're just in the midst of finishing an examination process online, which seems to have gone pretty well. So we've now, our term starts in, next academic year starts in September rather than August. So we've got then to get ready. And we've got three things that we have to think of that have guided our policy. Firstly, pretty much all of our UK students who have had offers want to come in, they want to come in person. So there's a driver. Secondly, a huge number of international students who've already provisionally accepted, many of them just can't come, either because their families have real safety concerns about travel at the moment, or because international travel isn't possible because of air flights, national movement restrictions, etc. And we don't think this is going to end by Christmas. At least in this country, this is going to be going on for a long time. And then the third thing we have to deal with is the safety restrictions that are going to be in place here, we think for 12 to 18 months. And that includes at the moment 2 meters of social distancing as a key to it. So you put all of that together, and the things that stand out are nothing is going to change quickly. So if you're going to do stuff, I don't think thinking that things are good, and I know Michael said pretty much the same thing, but I don't think things are going to dramatically step back to normal anytime ever. And when they do get back to normal, it'll be a completely new normal. So our response to all of this is a realization that we can only have about 15% of the normal number of students on campus to that we would normally have. The lecture in person is a thing of the past, at least for the next few years. There won't be any. They'll all be electronic. And oops, sorry, I might have lost me there for a second. We're going to have 3 lines of delivery going at exactly the same time. In person, there will be mainly domestic students, but international students who can make it, we will welcome with open arms. But much longer opening hours for campuses, using weekends, and very strict rosters. So we have a limited number of students on campus at any one point in time and staff. And then at the other extreme, online, definitely online through the whole of next academic year for students who can only access us online or only come online. But we anticipate that after Christmas, maybe some international students who've started online will be able to come to London in person. That remains to be seen. But most importantly, and this is the only way that this is going to work, what we're calling either hybrid or full sync operations. So a tutorial given by an academic that maybe has 15 people in the tutorial normally, well, still will have. They'll have 3 or 4 in person with distancing and masks. I should say we're also going to bring in testing. We're going to introduce our own testing for all staff and students, certainly for the antigen and for the virus. And we have the capacity to do that because we have huge medical research operations. So we'll do that in-house. And as I say, the full sync would have 3 or 4 students in person, and the others attending online, but in a rich IT environment that we're currently designing across our campuses to enable us to do this. And there'd be a sort of roster as to when they get their bid in person. Now, all of this sounds incredibly clunky. It's incredibly labor intensive. And we're regarding the next academic year very much as a transitional year because we can't continue this level of complexity long-term into the future. But transitioning to a new point, that when we come out of this, we'll have a lot more people working from home for part of the week. The advance into the e-technology space that this pandemic has produced will be in large part irreversible. So we won't be going back to the old norm. The new norm will be quite different. And I haven't spoken at all because it's a little bit outside the theme of this meeting about how one gets over 5,000 researchers back into their laboratories. But that also is a really major ongoing piece of work. So I think that's enough for introductory comments. Thank you.
Sounds like you have your hands very full and you're very busy. I think we'd love to come back to...
I can't hear you, Jenny. Is that just me?
Can you guys hear me? Have I lagged again?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you are.
I hear you
All
fine.
right, thank you very much, Ed. That was very helpful. And I think we'll have a lot of follow-ups in terms of how you're creating this rich IT
Jenny,
environment.
I can't hear you at all. Is it just me or?
I think it might be just you. I'm getting nods from everybody else that they can hear me. Is that right? Okay, so Ed,
Yes.
I'll come back to you, but Pepe, I'd love to come to you if I could.
Yes.
Pepe is at the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. He has not yet made a decision about opening. There are 29 campuses in 26 cities and 90,000 students. That's twice the size of Greenland. So this decision is going to affect a lot of people. Your background is in computer science. You've been the Dean of the Education School, and now you're the Director of Tech Labs, which is a disruptive innovation unit tasked with figuring out what higher ed is going to look like in 2030. So here's a preview. We're getting a little fast forwarding here. So I understand
exactly.
you are in conversations with students, with faculty, and with parents about this decision. And I'd like to hear you talk about your process and how you're incorporating all those voices. That's an interesting method, an interesting process. So talk us through how you're making your decision.
Well, we first tell you that we were very fast to move to
Byrne.
online model. we call it a digital flexible model. We closed the university for 1 week, like 40 days ago. And after what week, I think that Ed has his microphone open.
Yeah, Ed, would you mind turning off your microphone, please? So we can hear you. If you wouldn't mind turning that off, so Pepe can keep going. Thank you.
We closed for 1 week to train our faculty, and we decided that the fastest way to train them was remote learning model. So we built some material courses. We had a lot of people that had experience with online learning that we already had in the university as mentors, like peers. And we reopened the university after 1 week. The experience was very good because the students and our parents, I will say also our professors, were very happy and grateful that we could continue the academic operation very fast. But you know that model, if is not really distance learning, no? It's something that you cannot sustain on time. So after that, you see that that sense of gratitude start to wash out. And so we move to a different model. We call it the Digital Flexible Model Plus. For that model, we made a diagnostic of our faculty with a very long survey of what were their pedagogical skills and technological skills, self-rated by them. And after that, every department head reviewed the dossiers of each of the faculty members and made some suggestions of where they have to go to adapt their model so that is more online, I would say online model now. Before we just started, we were saying that this pandemic is making us build a plane where we fly. No, so this is exactly what is going on. Normally, when you build an online course, you have to do it several months beforehand. You plan what you want to do, and then you start to deliver. So now you're delivering, and in the middle of that, now we are redoing our plan. Now we see that there is some kind of stress. Stress is growing in our faculty and our students, and we know that's happened. In the meantime, we also try to reproduce some of the value proposition of the campus at a distance. We have something that we call life care, that is a leadership and a student formation. Is sort of like a student affairs in what you call student affairs in the universities. So it's culture, sports, and leadership activities for the students. So we created Life at Home, which is the reproduction of that online with communities, courses, including, I don't know, Zumba, mindfulness, whatever. And also we had already a line that is called Te Queremos. It's like we like you, and it's a line for mental health or emotional health for our students and faculty also, which has been very successful. And we produce more materials online for that were also given to the families of the students, not only to the students, because now in this family setting of confinement, there's a lot of the things that are happening are, it's like growing a lot. So we are going now at the end of the semester. Mexico started with the pandemic later than other countries that are represented here. So our core is on the top this week, supposedly, in Mexico, is what we expected. So we decided that the summer session will be an online session. And for the August session, the fall session, we think that we have to plan for a resilient semester. What does it mean? We have to plan for a semester that can be delivered in different ways. I think that what Ed and Michael have said is very clever, but in fact, we're on the we have several scenarios. No, we don't know what will happen. It might be that everything will be closed, completely closed. So what if everything is online again? And or some moments we have to close, some moments we have to open, or we cannot have all the students at the same time in a classroom. No, we don't have lecture halls in our in our educational model. We have a small, I think the biggest one will be like 35, 40 people in the same room. But nevertheless, sometimes you cannot fill in all that people if you have that social distance, no? So what if you have 20 students only at the same time? You have to change that. And also we made calculation of how many people will be in the corridors when would you change the classroom. Even that is a problem, to change from one classroom to another. During that time, you cannot keep the social distance policy. So there are a lot of scenarios that we are looking at, and we will always put our students and our faculty health first. So last week we have a whole town meeting, and that's your original question. Sorry for the long answer. And in that whole meeting, we invited parents, faculty, students at the same time. And it was very transparent, I think, from our authorities of the university, because we said what we know and what we don't know, and what we are planning for them. And I think it was well received by the community.
So when will you do you have any sense of when you'll make a decision about the fall?
I think that the decision will be made also taking into account the recommendations of the government. What are the recommendations of the government? At the end of May, supposedly we can go back to normal after the 1st of June. So we'll see if that happens. So maybe June will be a decisive month.
That'd be okay. Thank you very much, Pepe. That was very helpful. Lauren, I would love to turn to you if I could. Lauren, Herckis is at special faculty at the Simon Initiative. Really left an impression on me. Lauren is an anthropologist. Lauren's an anthropologist. Can you guys hear me now? Is that better?
Yep. There was a little bit of lag, but you seem to be back now. All right.
Okay. Lauren is an anthropologist and she studies academics, which I think all of us would agree is a very interesting subject. The thing that she was specifically talking about was studying the faculty at Carnegie Mellon University, which is a leading university in learning science, and asking the question, why don't the professors at a leading university studying learning science, why aren't they taking up the research that they're producing? So it was a very sort of interesting exercise. And so I think, Lauren, I would love to have you talk about, you study how hard it is to get people to change through the lens of sort of culture and institutions and human systems and all of this messiness. What is this moment? You know, people just changed on a dime. That's fantastic. They had to. Now what? Will they keep changing? Will they revert back to normal? Is this, you know, are we headed for a whole new business model? Where are we going?
Well, isn't that the question of the moment, right? Yeah, you know, I've spent a number of years now exploring how and why people do change their teaching practice, and you know what it takes to get people to make a shift, and how often they don't. And here we are in the last couple of months seeing just a dramatic transformation that was unasked for and unanticipated. And you know, there are a lot of institutions that are saying, wow, you know, look at what we did. We went from, you know, this one model to a completely different model where we finished semesters successfully. So this is possible. But you're exactly right that this is a unique moment, right? This is not, as Pepe mentioned earlier, normally, if someone is planning to put a new model into place, there's a great deal of planning and consideration and, you know, integration that is not only required but recommended in order to put into place the best practices and the pedagogies and technological tools that are preferred and familiar and appropriate. And, you know, the dramatic transformation meant building the plane while we were flying it. And so I think that given more time, a lot of folks who made a transformation would have done things differently. But then, you know, if we could be in a different situation, I think a lot of us would prefer to be. So what does the future hold? I think that the crisis transformations that we've seen won't happen again and again. You know, we may continue to be in crisis after crisis, and that remains to be seen. But the moment where, you know, either we transform or we abandon our students or abandon our classes or, whatever it happens to be, that there was no other choice really. Now we know a little bit more and can do a little bit more planning. And so the semester that we just experienced can't be repeated. The social context, the emotional experience, the immediacy of the need have all shifted. And so, in future semesters, there's both the opportunity for more planning and more consideration, and also all of the necessity of careful weighing of options and consideration of implications that we simply didn't have the opportunity for this semester.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely heard some of this cold moment, right? It's all going to be amazing. This is transformational. And then we've heard a lot of students saying this experience really sucked. So we don't want to go back to that. But I think the point you're making is we can't go back, right? This is it. We're moving forward because there will be more crises. So there will have to be a level of adaptation, which brings me to my second question, which I'd love to have you all dive in. And I think I might go for Ed first, if I could, just because of some of the questions he asks in his book. But business model, right? And this is something that's near and dear to everybody's heart. When you shift to an online model, in part, entirely, however you do it, what does that mean for your business model? What does that mean for universities? Ed, one of the Ed's book with Charles Clark, they ask 10 questions. A few of those are, will the research-led university that's been the key model for a century and a half persist, or has it had its day? How many universities will be left and what size will they be? How many students will be studying courses by different modes? So this has all been accelerated, Ed, in a huge way. What happens now? Can universities survive, or are we just going to accept that online learning is a fundamental part of the higher education formula now? And if Ed's not there, I'm going to take that question right to someone else. Ed, are you still there? You might still be muted because I still see you on there.
Ed, can you hear us, please?
Let me turn this on. Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
So, yes, is the university dead? I'll sum up my question. Oh, nope, he's gone mute again. All right. Oh, you're back?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
I couldn't hear Jenny. Laurie, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. Ed, the question to you is, with this advent, this blossoming of online learning, has the business model of universities now shifted and changed for good? And how do you think about that in the context of some of the questions you raised in your recent book?
I think that's a very difficult question to answer at the moment. Look, many of my colleagues would not believe it's changed for good. They think we'll be moving back to a norm which is almost identical to the one that we've left before the crisis. That isn't my view. I think as a sector, we're on a journey that was probably going to take about 10 years to a new place. And I think that will have been accelerated dramatically by this crisis. For one thing, I run a traditional university, a very old university, multiple Nobel laureates, all of that. And until recently, we were still having faculties having difficulty accepting lecture capture. What a different world we're in now, where, in 18 months from now, the bulk of teaching will have been done online, and people will have acquired the expertise that the dedicated online course designers, we have about 100 of those in King's, but they've been segmented from the main academic body because they've been dealing with the online courses, not with the stuff we do in person. And, we'll have a different work pattern. We'll have different campus utilization, and we'll have a much richer adoption of technology. We'll have a fusion of the best of the old and the best of the new. And I don't believe the world will ever be the same. But whether it's only moderately different or whether it's radically different, I think will depend in large part how long this crisis goes on for.
Right. And just to follow up, Michael was saying they are going to reduce to it, if we go to an online model fully and the in-person has to take a pause, they're going to reduce tuition, they're going to reduce fees. Is that true across the board? Are we just looking at less revenue?
Are we looking at less revenue, Ed? Are you going to have to reduce tuition and fees as Michael is suggesting they might do?
I heard Michael, I think, say he was thinking of doing that. No, we're not doing that because for all of our online master's degrees, of which we have a large number, we develop them like Georgia Tech does at the same level of educational quality as in person. And we find that the resources needed to support that type of offering are every bit as great as in person. So we have no intention of reducing fees because we're absolutely determined that the educational experience online will be as, or hybrid will be as good as it is in person. Now, revenue is a very different matter. Any university like us, where half your students are international, and in the UK that translates to high fee students, the amount, to use a business term, at risk in the current market is mind-boggling. And for the next year, we know we have reserves. We're going to draw some of those down, but we're going to have to make significant efficiencies, at least in the short term. I was the president of Monash University, Australia's biggest university, before taking this job. The big Australian universities, it's all through the press, their deficit is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions in the next period. And these deficits cannot be worn by or dealt with by a variation of business as usual. So this is another thing which is going to accelerate some change in our business models. But that will be gradual, and I think we'll all have to draw down reserves to cushion the next period.
Thank you, Ed. Michael, could you talk a little bit about building? I mean, you've built a new business model already, and now you're looking at doing it again. Take us through what you're thinking about right now. What is the opportunity here? What do you want to reinvent? And maybe just a little context for people listening that don't know about Paul Quinn, about what you've done already.
Sure. So first, let me respond to something that Ed said. I think that there's a difference, and people don't make this distinction. There's a difference between tuition and fees, right? Your tuition speaks to your academic delivery, right? Your academic quality. I mean, the learning experience, right? You can maintain that online, right? We're not purporting to reduce tuition, but there are fees adjustments that have to be made. And one of the little tricks that we do in higher education that frustrates families and in many ways alienates them is we don't fundamentally and clearly explain what they're paying for, right? So families hear the word tuition and they think this is all I have to pay, not realizing there's an entirely different set of fees which are also being charged. And then people get angry because they feel as if you have moved the cheese, per se, right? Now, that's less of a concern when you're dealing with people who generationally have been college attendees and graduates, right? So my children, we know what all of this means, right? But for folks who are coming out of a different space, they need a different explanation and they need a different sensitivity, right? So for us, we looked at it and we said, look, we are absolutely committed, and one could argue obsessed, with delivering a high quality experience in a remote learning format. One of the differences with our school is we aren't an institution that has been hijacked by individuals who refuse to understand the concept of evolution, right? There was always going to be a move towards online learning. It had already taken place.
Sure.
I mean, and this idea that you can't have a rich academic experience if a professor isn't sitting in front of you is a fallacy, right? It's a fallacy that we continue to support because it benefits us to do so, all right? Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't challenges. I mean, listen, we have transitioned to a hybrid model because we are America's first and only urban work college. Our students, in addition to going to school, they also have to go to work, and they work off campus in corporate environments. And when we say corporate environments, we're not speaking as if you don't have nonprofits and schools. It just means that you're off campus, right? And to allow for the flexibility needed to satisfy the work hour requirements, our students are taking courses in a hybrid delivery fashion. Part of the course for the week is taught online. The other part of it is taught in person, right? So it gives us the opportunity to engage and to experiment with this delivery function. But again, when you have a significant amount of people who are coming to you having already had a disruptive educational experience and are, older students, right? Then you need to have that flexibility, and you need to be able to make sure that flexibility is a premium experience. And so we are always looking to evolve, right? What I tell my staff, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, is we live in a time where no problem is ever permanently solved. It just isn't. Change is occurring at too rapidly of a pace. And since it's doing that, the idea that you can solve a problem and you're good for the next 20 years, that's just not true, right? So you have to be able to say, I am going to solve this problem with the information I have at my disposal now, while creating a ecosystem which allows me to adapt efficiently and quickly as the need arises. But you must continuously ask yourself every single year. I would argue you should start asking yourself this question every semester. Are we still right? Is this still the best way to solve this problem? How do we get better? And what this experience has done for all of us is remove the excuses for not asking those questions in a more consistent manner. And we think the business model that we can employ now adds great value to our students. Look, we don't think people should be paying for school for the rest of their lives. All right, we have driven down the average cost from, the traditional American student loan debt of $37,000, $38,000, $40,000. We're now down under $15,000, right? And we did that quickly. We reduced tuition and fees by $10,000. While we are in this space, while we don't have the capability of having students go to school on campus, why would we charge you room and board? All right, why would we charge you some of the other things that we would charge you? We have simplified it. You will pay tuition, you will pay a technology fee, and you will pay your 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week telehealth fee, right? So that we can be sure that you still have access to healthcare. And after that, the rest of it we'll figure out later.
Ed, can I just chip in? Because I think we're in stunning agreement. It's perhaps a difference of terminology in different countries, but our students are pretty much all residential. We have 10,000 beds, and those who aren't in university accommodation are living away from home in shared apartments and what have you. And of course, they will totally save, the more than half the expense which comes with living in London. They'll also save student union fees and that type of thing. But we are trying very hard through a greatly enhanced co-curricular offering online to give them a flavor of being in student clubs, to give them a flavor of what it's like to be in London, and all sorts of other things. So it's not just the formal curriculum. And of course, how well we do that, I think, will in large part determine how much students enjoy this type of delivery.
I think that
Nope, please, Lord.
I think that we've been talking around something that's really important here, which is to say, there's a lot of experience, a lot of research, a lot of programs that demonstrate that students can learn well in remote, hybrid, all kinds of models of education. But the university was founded on a concept, and we think of it as a community of experience for faculty, students, staff, administrators. There's a whole other dimension here of the university experience for many students. And it means different things to different individuals, different families, different professionals. But to account for or consider that component of post-secondary education brings in a whole other set of questions different institutions are grappling with that in different ways, but we can't just focus on, okay, so this student is going to take introductory physics. At the end of the semester, will they know the answers to the exam questions? University experiences go well beyond that.
I love that. I love that term, community of experience. I'm going to hold on to that for a second. Pepe, tell us a little bit about, thank you for bringing that up, Lauren, because I actually think that's so important. And you're right. This is accelerating the learning, but it's also accelerating how you create that community of experience online, whether we can or not. Pepe, I'd love for you to weigh in on the question maybe that Lauren just asked, but also tie in a little bit about this. You've been trying to figure out a vision for 2030. And is this getting you closer to it? And if not, what's changing? How is it changing that? What are you learning from this moment that told you, oh, that vision I had actually doesn't make sense or does? But also I'd love for you to weigh in on this question from Lauren of how you create that community of experience online.
Well, I wanted to say that we have a lot of experience on distance education, and we offer completely fully online programs. Graduate programs, not undergraduate programs. So in undergraduate, we are a completely full-time face-to-face university, but nevertheless, our students can take online courses, and they are encouraged to take online courses because we believe that the future of their learning will be online. So they will acquire the skills of online learning. So every year, around 20,000 students take 1 or 2 online courses in the university. So we have a lot of experience with that, and I think there's no student graduated from the university that hasn't taken one of online courses. The experience right now is different because the courses are online and their life is online, so they confine in their houses, no? So I think that changed completely the way that you feel in the environment. And one of the things that we have seen also is that most of the worries about the learning or the experience are from the parents that more than from the students. I think that parents are more worried than the students, which I think is good because there's a generational gap, and we have to reproduce somehow the value proposition of the university online, and we were not prepared for that completely. And as part of what I already explained that we are trying to do, to try to reproduce that online experience. And if we're good at that in a world autumn semester in which we will be locking down or restricted or opening, etc., I think we can have a better experience for the students. We can combine those things. Now, about the vision 2030, we have a very bold vision for 2030 in our university. In particular, in the learning part, we see ourselves as an open learning platform that is experiential, that is connected, that we can give credit to the students for what they have learned in other places, and that we become the partners for life of our students. That platform is digital, but it's not only online. That means that it can be face-to-face, blended, etc., but it's digitally enabled. Also, that's part of what we see. And what's happening right now reminds me of meme, I think you say in English. I forgot. Lori told me the word. No, it's those jokes that they send on internet, and they said meme, a meme.
A meme,
exactly. It's meme in Spanish. So I don't know how to pronounce that. And it said, what accelerated the digital transformation of the company? And what answer A is the CEO, and answer B is the coronavirus now. So I think the coronavirus have been accelerated some things. It's not the best scenario. I agree with Lauren, but at least it puts you in a situation where you can amplify the inefficiencies of your current model. No, I think that, for instance, you are lecturing 3 hours in a lecture room and you go to Zoom or whatever, and you repeat that, you amplify the inefficiencies of that. So one of the things that I believe is that first, the students realize that that doesn't work and will be pushing for something more active. But also our faculty will realize that what they are doing is not because they are doing that on a classroom that is much, much better. It's just that it's amplifying that inefficiency somehow. So I have faith that maybe not all, but some of them also will understand that they have to change that model. And also leadership in universities. So for me, one of the things that can come out good from this is that people accelerate a little bit what they were planning for 2030, and that's what's happening with us. So we are seeing an acceleration of some of our plans. So things that we believe that we will do for 2025, we now think that we should do them for the next 2 years. No? And we have some task force internally on those strategic projects that we are working faster, looking for quick hits and implementation of those things faster in the following months, years, to be able to implement them.
So things are speeding up significantly. So there might be all of these plans in place, but each of these plans is getting sort of tested, beta tested, iterated, reiterated way faster than we're used to. So it's 2:45, and I want to be mindful and considerate to our audience, and a lot of good questions are coming in, and a few of them are falling into the category. If we think of higher education as being around increasing attainment, improving equity, making it more affordable. Specifically, I've gotten a few questions here. Will the changes that you all are making in your universities make it more accessible to more international students and more affordable? Why don't I start with Ed? Or anyone, actually, just jump in if you have a thought. I don't need to start with anyone. That was ridiculous.
Well, I can say, oh, please go ahead.
No, I don't see many universities in the mood of Michael's institution that they're looking at how you make it your value proposition, listening to your students, the public that you serve, and trying to reduce your cost structure to be more accessible. I don't see that in the moment. No, so. I don't think about the cost. I think that the access in terms of distance or traveling or online, blended, more flexibility. I think that is possible. That we will see a change in the following years, but I'm not sure about the cost of the university.
And I think that was similar to what Ed was saying, because you have to keep up the quality, and the quality is very important. I think we might have just lost. Oh no, he's back.
Well, right. I think that, there are costs associated with different facets of different institutions. And in some ways, so I can't speak to the business model per se, but I can say that the traditional structures of universities are barriers for a lot of populations, a lot of students, international, but also domestic within individual countries and even communities. And so the transition to more remote or hybrid models does mean, in some instances, there are higher barriers for some populations, but in other ways, there are lower barriers for some populations. There are lots of folks who will find it much easier to attend or engage with institutions and educational opportunities than could in the traditional model. So I think that this is a shift, not a transformation to more or less accessible, but more accessible for some and less accessible for others with the blossoming of these new opportunities. Now, there are some students who simply can't, for a variety of reasons, make it to a campus.
Right.
And this makes it possible to be there, this remote and hybrid set of models.
Right. And do you think that this see greater pressure to prove employability outcomes as we head towards a recession? I think it's safe to say we're in a recession.
I think that's been a pressure for the past decade. We've seen this increasing attention on, what happens to students after they graduate, but also, how do individual components of a university experience contribute to employability and professional outcomes after graduation. And some institutions and some cohorts of institutions have quantified that more so than others have, or have attended to that more. But I think that that's a question that people have been increasingly asking. And I also think there's been a lot of really valuable discussion about how credentialing and the breaking down of a post-secondary education into its component parts for individual evaluation loses something. Sometimes the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and sometimes it's not. But so being very frank about whether we're talking about student experience writ large or the particular skills gained in a particular class or course of study, I think is really important, because it's different in different contexts. Some institutions offer some value propositions and others really focus on other kinds of outcomes.
So a lot of questions about what the biggest challenges you all have faced in moving online quickly. What have been some of the big challenges you've faced? And combined with that is a question around what have students lost?
Yeah, the question was for me because I sorry, I lost you.
It wasn't, but now that you've raised your hand, I think you should jump right in there. The question was biggest challenges in having to do this accelerated move online, and what have students lost in this move?
Okay. I will keep it short so that we can take more questions. I will summarize in our president says that we want to have a model that is high tech and high touch. No, so you can have the technology that works very well, but also how you have that human touch and that component that is engaging and that you work with that. And it's challenging to do that face to face. Also, no, it's not that online is more different than face to face. But how, when you move from face to face to online, how do you keep that high tech and high touch environment? How you make it more engaging? How you make it really worth connecting to a session or working with your professor or your teammates and really do something that is significant.
I'd like to build on that and say that, I think that when we think about what students have lost, we can think about what they have lost in this current transition, and that might be different than what students might lose in a transition to online teaching in the future. Because in the current model, or the current context, I should say, some classes, for example, a faculty member might focus on maintaining that connection with the students and reach out to each of their students individually and ask how they can be supportive and recognize that, this student doesn't have internet access in the place where they are sheltering and those students do, or, to attend to the high touch needs of students and have less time to ensure that the entirety of the course, the educational experience that they had planned, is transformed for the moment. But that doesn't mean that that same course would be experienced similarly in the future, right? Whereas a different instructor might really focus on ensuring that at the end of the semester, students are able to pass those same exams with flying colors, but have to sacrifice some of that high touch connection. There may be some students who are just not able to engage with the course in the way that it's transformed. So depending on the student, the context in which they're quarantining or contending with social contexts, there are students who may not have a place to shelter or may not have a space where they feel safe. And so for them to continue to engage with a class when they no longer have even the resources they had available during the semester a couple of weeks ago, there are different stakes. There are different things at stake for different students in different courses. In a transition to online teaching, I don't think that we find these same risk and reward kinds of trade-offs, right? In a future semester, we can plan differently to support a wider variety of students or to create an educational experience that's equally accessible to a different set of students. I don't think that we have to lose, even community or the campus experience or the experience of opportunity to learn and grow in new ways in a new context simply because we are moving into remote or hybrid instruction rather than a traditional brick and mortar campus. But what that might look like is going to vary from place to place. And it's going to take some real re-envisioning of some institutions and programs that see themselves first and foremost as being in a physical space. The architecture is important.
Ed and Michael, could I get you to build on any of that? Was really helpful. Thank you, Lauren. Do you guys want to build on any of that challenges, what students are losing right now? Any thoughts on that before we wrap up?
I mean, I think that there's always challenges associated with troubling the water, right? I mean, we are talking about a generational change taking place in an incredibly short period of time. And we are talking about doing it in a sector that has been historically resistant to change outside of a very controlled environment. And so here's the good news. The good news is this is life, right? So what we're dealing with now is actually the most realistic gift that we can give our students, right? We are shattering this illusion of control, that you can predict what's going to happen to you step by step by step. The reality of it is you need to develop an entrepreneur's mentality to managing your life, right? And that is, and Babson College in Boston really sums this up best. And they say be entrepreneurial in your thoughts and your actions, right? It doesn't mean that everyone's going to create a business, but it does mean you're going to have to create a life. And that in the process of doing so, you're going to have to be able to move rapidly and in starkly different directions than you may have planned. This is what it's forcing us to do. I mean, you know, my wife just sent me a message where an article where Governor Cuomo is saying that the folks who are being hospitalized now in New York are folks who really hadn't been out and about, right? So that will, if that turns out to be true, that means we have to change the way we engage. We are dealing with an enemy that we don't know, right? We don't know. It just showed up. We haven't had a chance to study it. We do not know. And I think in this environment, what we have to stress to our students and we have to reinforce to ourselves is there will be no crime associated with exercising an abundance of caution. And the business model that we have to embrace is one that allows us to maintain our ongoing concern while also exercising an abundance of caution. And you can no longer think about these things separately. I am jealous of Ed because I don't have a medical school at my disposal, right? I don't have research teams that are working to figure this out. But what we do have is the trust of a community of folks that have become accustomed to us getting it right and to fighting the fights that they can't articulate themselves, right? And for those individuals, we are going to err on the side of caution and be unapologetic about doing so.
Thank you. One super quick last question, and then I'm going to wrap up. But a few people did ask the question about students. Will students have a lot of feedback? And since we don't have a huge amount of questions, yes or no, how are you tapping into your students to feedback on the experience of the online and the experience of the community that you're trying, the community of experience, as Lauren said, that you're trying to create? Are they part of this strategic decisions?
Absolutely. Everything that we do, we engage our students' feedback. We went to a pass-fail system this spring after the COVID-19 model hit because our Student Government Association president came to me and said, hey, I think this would really be helpful to our students. Every decision that we make, we do it in concert with our students because we view every major decision, right? Because we view them as our partners in this enterprise. So yes, long-winded way of saying yes.
Right. Okay. Ed and Pepe, quickly.
Ed, can I ask you to comment on how students have been part of the strategic decisions going forward?
Yes, we've been involving, for some years, increasingly more every year, students in all aspects of our governance. So our student association is called the Student Union, and we've been every step we've been in synchrony with the Student Union. Of course, it's been an amazingly difficult time for our students. We've moved nearly 40,000 students out of their dorms, out of their rooms to all parts of the world. And we have students online at the moment doing exams in China, India, France. It's just incredibly complicated. And the way the student community has risen to the challenge is every bit as impressive as the way the staff have. And you can only do this, the synchronous effort. But one thing the students make very clear to us is they agree with us that the campus-based experience is not a thing of the past. We're moving to an extreme position because of the crisis, and we'll settle back to a somewhat different position than we started in. But we will still have university campuses, full of vibrant people, staff and students in the decades ahead. Make no mistake.
That's right.
Pepe, that was what you were saying. Parents are more worried about the changes than the students, right? The students,
yes.
Punches a little bit better, right? Okay.
Yes. Just to answer your question quickly, I'm sorry.
Please.
Can I? Yes, we monitor the students, their emotions. We have a survey where we monitor how they feel emotionally. We also monitor for every single thing what they are feeling about the model, how well the teacher and the model is doing, and we also do focus groups with students to understand what they think about the new things that we will implement. We also have mentors, so that students go to their mentors, and we document everything that the students do in a system, that we can pull out the information of what the students are thinking, and when they contact their mentors, or when their mentors are actively contacting the students.
Right. So there's a lot of engagement. All right. I'm going to wrap it up on that. Thank you so much, Lauren, Pepe, Michael, and Ed. This was really interesting. I wish we could stay on and talk for 2 more hours, because I certainly have questions. And if you guys could see the quality of the questions, they're very good, but we have to go. I'd love to leave on this quote that Michael gave us. What this has done is remove the excuses for not asking those questions more persistently. And these are questions about learning in the future and change is persistent. So thank you very much for your time and for your insights. And thank you very much to our audience. Over to you, Lori.
Thank you. Yes, thank you again, Lauren, Pepe, Ed, Michael. Many thanks to you, Jenny. Special thanks to Ed. I'm so sorry that we've had the technical issues that have resulted in him, one, not being able to be seen by our audience, although he can see the rest of the panelists, and for some reason him not being able to hear Jenny. So thanks for persisting throughout, regardless. The recording of this session will be available. We'll also follow up, as we always will for our virtual events, with a summary of the major points from today. If you haven't done so already, I want to invite you to join the Learnit mailing list for the details of the next event, and to follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn. And please take care, keep well, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.